if you focus on the time first, then that gives you time to think about how you make money or how your business runs, so you can implement that one huge idea, and the money just takes care of itself after that.
Welcome to the Freedom Point Podcast, where we talk about time freedom, passive investing through real estate, finance, and mindset. Let's dive in. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice, not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer. All right. Welcome back, Freedom Point Podcast listeners. Thank you again for jumping into yet another episode of the Freedom Point. I'm so glad you're here with us again today. I've got another amazing guest. I've got Brian Herriot. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having you on the show today and talking a little bit more about, your background and being an author, a speaker, a financial advisor, an entrepreneurship coach. Brian does offer a new and different take on wealth building, lifestyle design, and retirement. Brian's currently working toward a world where everyone has the same time and support to define what success means to them and focus on building character over building resumes. So all that said, Brian, I know you've got a lot going on. You've got a great background, a track record. Just would love for you to tell us a little bit more about, yourself, your background journey, what you're focused on today, et cetera.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. So for the last 3 years or so, I have been working as a financial advisor and entrepreneurial coach, and I coach people on a concept that I, should be familiar with people, but I call time freedom, which is not necessarily financial freedom, because that, financial freedom, you don't have to work anymore. With time freedom, you do have to work. However, if you can find the perfect work and structure it in a way when you, for example, maybe have your summers off, but still can live a wonderful life, you can do that a lot sooner than having to wait for 100% absolute financial freedom. So I didn't fall into this, but I worked myself into this back in the summer of 2023, and since have been taking long periods of time off, usually over the summer. So I live most of the year in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then I spend my summers here up in northern Wisconsin at a cabin on a lake that we have, and we do a lot of water skiing and all the fun stuff like that. And about in 2023, when this happened, a lot of people asked me questions, and are you retired? And I'm like, no, look at me, I'm not retired yet. And then they're like, well, you must be independently wealthy, and I'm definitely not independently wealthy. And so that eventually they're just peppering me with questions about how I do this, and so that ultimately turned into a entrepreneurial coaching, because my lifestyle business is a huge component of how I can live this way. And then also, pairing that with the investment income that's required, to kind of combat the inconsistent income that comes with not working for 2 or 3 months a year. And so that kind of leads me to where I am now. Now I'm, becoming more comfortable with this concept, continuing to develop it through authoring a book, which has been an incredible experience, and doing keynotes as well, to really kind of own this concept of time freedom, which I think is one that is just, I personally feel is more achievable for people earlier in life than pure, 100% financial freedom.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I appreciate you kind of, separating out, financial freedom from time freedom. I also kind of think about, the cliche sayings of, having the right work-life balance. We hear that a lot, right? Or we hear this concept of work hard, play hard, right? So can you kind of speak a little bit more about kind of the world's perception of, time freedom, financial freedom, relative to those cliche sayings?
Definitely. So work-life balance is something that I, and probably all of your listeners, have tried to get, but just never seems to work. And I've even, was it Jeff Bezos recently started calling it work-life alignment, which sounds like a cop-out, like, yeah, we can't do balance, so we're just going to align, which means more work, which is basically maybe just telling it like it is. But the way I think of work-life balance is, having a life where you can take 3 hours off in the middle of the day so that you can work 4 hours late into the night, And it's really around trying to balance everything and looking at things in terms of like days and weeks. Time freedom for me is like years and decades, and it's how you kind of design your work around your life, like in a much like broader way of view. And then the financial freedom part, like the phrase I think of is money buys freedom, right? So people go, I'm going to make all this money, and then I'm going to have the time because I'm rich. But really, I think it is backwards. Like if you focus on the time first, I believe that then that gives you time to think about, more strategically about how you make money or how your business runs, so you can might implement that one huge idea that really launches your business, still protects your time, and so you're pursuing the time first, and then the money just takes care of itself after that.
It makes total sense. I had this experience a couple of years ago as I was transitioning from corporate America to small business entrepreneurship, basically building up a side hustle on the side, while working a full time, corporate demanding job. And one thing that I found interesting is that as the side hustle became more of a main hustle for me, I was finding myself spending less time on my primary occupation, which was in technology sales. And in technology sales, it's all about you eat what you kill, right? And what was interesting about that journey is that I was spending half the amount of time on my corporate day job, but yet still making the same income. So can you speak to us a little bit about, how people can make more money by working less, and how does that actually work in practice? Maybe what mind shifts would that require?
Yeah, I think conventional wisdom tells us that, to get 10% better, you need to work, 10% harder, 10% faster, 10% longer. But then at the end of the day, you've put all that effort in, and you're only 10% better. And so the book that I first read where I kind of opened my mind to this is Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy's 10x is easier than, or 10x is easier than 2x, where they say, think instead about the one thing that you can do to grow 10x instead of the 10 things you can do to, get 10% better. And so I've thought a lot about that. And I think it comes down to two things. Like you need to pursue this one thing. So what is this one thing? I think it's something that you love, because if you don't love it, you're not going to keep at it, right? If you love it to the point of it feeling like play or fun, then you're just going to keep doing it, whereas other people will give up on it, right? That's one thing. That's like the first litmus test. And then the thing has to be something that grows your business exponentially. And again, I've thought about this a lot too, and I think it comes down to like three things. You need to have like an exponentially valuable skill, and I can tell you a story about this one, but or an exponentially valuable idea, right? So the idea there is time freedom, for example. People kind of know what it is. Nobody really owns this idea. It's going to be my thing, right? And if you can kind of take ownership of an idea, you can get authority and notoriety, and good things happen from that. And another one is like an exponentially valuable relationship. So somebody that because you went to high school with some huge, highly influential person that could just change the dynamic of everything that you're doing. So if you can think about what you choose to do, the one thing, and if it kind of falls in one of those areas, then you're going to be better off focusing your time, which is going to be less overall time on that thing than on all the other things combined, because they're not going to grow as much for you.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I appreciate your kind of last comment about, your network. We hear that cliche saying before that your, network is your net worth. And, I can tell you by personal experience, that's just absolutely true. And truth be told, your network doesn't always have to be, people that you're directly associated with or affiliated with. It can be the people that you follow, right? The people on social media, the people on podcasts, the people who have maybe authored books, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can surround yourself with a network of others that will help you exponentially grow to the next level.
I'm Zach Haptonstall, CEO and co-founder of Rise 48 Equity. Our goal is to help you protect and grow your wealth by investing in these large multifamily apartment buildings. We do all the work as far as sourcing these large apartment buildings from the brokers, doing all of the on-site management with our vertically integrated property management company, doing all the renovations with our vertically integrated construction company. We completely rebrand the exteriors. We will renovate the interiors to our full platinum level scope, which increases the value of the asset to get that profit margin for the investors. If you'd like to learn about how you can partner with us on these exciting opportunities, and go to our website and set up a call with our team.
So, Brian, I know that this concept of net worth is something that I remember hearing about when I was a child, right? The idea was when I was a child, if I could only have $1 million net worth, I could retire and sit on a beach and drink Mai Tais the rest of my life. As I got older, that goalpost kept moving, and it kept moving because of lifestyle creep, as well as the inflation monster. So, would like for you to talk to us a little bit more about, why is it that people chase net worth, but yet at the same token they're really unfulfilled, and where do you kind of draw that line between enough and excess in a healthy financial life?
Yeah, I was just thinking of your comment about Mai Tais. It's either Mai Tais or pina coladas, right? That people want to drink. Um, my thinking on this is that, yes, with inflation, higher cost of everything, people spending more, for you to become fully financially free, you need to create this mountain of savings, like, and it's not a hill, it's like a mountain, because if you use the 4% rule, that's a very small number. When you say, I can live on 4% of $1 million is $40,000. I don't know many people that can live on $40,000. But then what happens is you get stuck just continuing to build and build and build the savings mountain. And I was not born in Colorado, but I'm more of like a lake and a water person than a mountain person. Because on your way up, you're like sacrificing and saving, and then you get to the top, but you're thinking, well, maybe I'm not quite yet at the top, right? It's the one more year syndrome thing going on. And because then once you stop working, you're 100% reliant on the markets or whatever your other things are, if you're not working anymore, on the way down. So it's just this constant struggle. The way I look at it is more of like water based. So really what you need to focus on is your river of cash. Like, in a given year, I'm 50 years old, and in a given year I need to come up with so much cash in order to live my life. Now, that leads to what I call the time freedom formula, right? So in a given year, you need to come up with your lifestyle expenses. And that could be lower, that could be high. It's totally up to you. But I actually believe that if you like spending money and it brings you joy and you have wonderful times with it, do it. But then with that bigger number, you look at the 4% of whatever savings you have, it's not going to be enough. And that's okay. But factor that in, because then the difference between those two is what you need to then come up with in work. And this is the secret part, I think. It's like, so, I live in California. All right. So don't judge me. You live on $200,000 a year, and, you can get $50,000 from your savings. $150,000 is what you need to come up with. So then the key is not to try to like grow that until, now you're making 500 and a million, but like take 150, bump it up to 200, and then figure out how to earn that over time by working less and less and less and less. And the work that you do less and less and less and less is better and better and better and better. So you're really just kind of refining the work and doing this and that to figure out, like, how can I do my best work in the least amount of time to make that additional amount, because then you're covered for the year, and you can project that into the future to make sure that you're ultimately confident. But you're skipping over that whole part of working forever to save so much, and also being fearful on the way down. If you maintain a skill and you're kind of still active in the game, even though you're not working as much, you're still in it. So when the market crashes, because it always does, you're gonna be like, that's cool. I'm still working. It's just I don't like stress. I like living life easy. And opening up your mind to think, well, maybe I'll work longer because, I'm entrepreneurial and I love doing stuff anyway. Like, why not just, if once you decide to say, hey, maybe I'll work longer, it's almost a little more freeing than I'm going to retire early in a strangely odd way, for me at least.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, rather than, grind it out really hard for, 10 to 20 years and kind of hope that you get to that nest egg number that you've, dreamed of and wanted to achieve. Why not instead, reverse engineer that over the next 30 years, but actually be intentional with your schedule, which is something that I want to talk to you about next. I know that you kind of alluded to this in the beginning, where you talk about kind of your seasonal, schedule. What is a seasonal schedule, and how does that help entrepreneurs or professionals structure their year more intentionally?
So I the concept of seasonal schedules, I started more as like forcing myself into figuring out how to not work in the summer. So it was originally summers off, and then it kind of transitioned into seasonal schedules. But what I tried to do is figure out how I could arrange my work and arrange my team, however small they are. It might be one assistant, and arrange those two things in such a way that I could take extended periods of time off. For me, it happened to be during the summer. For other people, I don't know, maybe they love the holidays and they love downhill skiing, so they want to do it over the winter time. But what you have to do is first you got to be like, the number one goal for me going in is not making a lot of money. It's making the right amount of money, kind of based on that time freedom formula. But the first goal has to be, I need to protect my time. So it's a situation like, you know, the way I the way I describe it is, some of us have had emergencies happen in our lives, and we've had to go take care of a father because our mother died or something, and you figure out a way. You figure out a way to take 1 or 2 months off. So think of it that way, but then just be happy it's not an emergency. But once you do that, when you look at your work, of course, passive income is great. And if you have it, you should keep it. But creating passive income is a lot of work. So I actually look at it a little bit differently. I think, how can I take the work that I'm doing and structure it into little chunks, or group it or something, chunk the work and shift it into the times that you want. So as a financial advisor, the first thing I do with everybody I work with is a time freedom forecast. It's a 2-hour chunk of work that is hugely valuable. Putting together a model for someone, and I line these up on certain days of the week and weeks of the month, never in the summer. So if you can figure out how to do that with your work, and then complement that with leveraging your team. So everyone, no matter if you're a solo entrepreneur or whatever, I believe should have some form of assistant, virtual assistant, because everybody has a calendar and everybody has email, and you should not be managing that. And it took me a long time. It took me a long time to get there and realize it, because, I'm Midwestern. I can do all that stuff. I don't need any help to do that. I even worked in a consulting firm that, prided itself on getting your hands dirty. And so I was deep entrenched in that. But now I've totally changed my mind, because, you can just be working on so many more valuable things. But if you combine those two things, that's how you can then kind of put and we come from this, like, art, hunting, and agriculture, and all these things in the distant past worked on these seasonal schedules, and everyone seemed to get along just fine. We don't have to just do 40 hours a week for the entire year. It's just, it's possible.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense to me. And I think, businesses that want to, scale, they want to grow, sometimes the person that is the key person in charge of the business, needs to find a way to replicate or replace themselves in order to be able to scale. But the same thing is true in your own life. If you want, more margin, in your life to spend the time and do the things that you want, sometimes that means we need to be willing to give up some of that control, which I think is a very big challenge for a lot of people, myself included, and of course a lot of other top performers as well.
Yeah, and you have to the fear I always have in talking about this is, people will go, "Oh, well, you're just talking about pulling back because you've achieved enough." And I actually don't believe that. I still have big goals for my life. I just also want to have these long periods of time off. And so, yeah, forcing yourself to have that extended time, I think I mentioned it earlier, is, it's not just about the rest and the relaxation. It allows you to think about those bigger ideas, which is pretty cool. And living a seasonal schedule doesn't mean you don't work hard. Like, and the months you're on, and it's fun and it's intense. And then you're ready to take a break for it.
Yeah, and sometimes, honestly, I think we need that. Sometimes it helps with mental clarity and focus in a big way. It's one of the main reasons why I chose to start running marathons, back when I was in the middle of my corporate careers, because it really allowed me to gain, mental focus, mental clarity. It was kind of an escape, from the cell phone, from the computer, and just gave me a chance to kind of really, be my creative self and come up with, things like what's the next, goal, going to look like, in the next month or two. So appreciate you, highlighting that. So let's talk about, Brian. Let's talk about that, mid-career listener, right? That's listening to this episode right now, and they really want to, get on this trajectory of building, long-term, wealth, but they feel like they're behind. What would you say to that type of an individual?
Um, what, I also made the transition from corporate to entrepreneurship, and, I'm conservative in my thinking. And the biggest thing for me that always held me back is I didn't know how the numbers were going to play out. Right. And, of course, there's also the mindset of like, am I an entrepreneur mindset? But let's just assume that you want to do that, but there's something holding you back. I think that, finally, after, trying 800 different calculators online, I found the four that if you combined them all together could actually show me how my money could be used that I've saved, but also if you work in kind of this, part year or part-time income, after the fact, what that would look like. So I took all those things and I created my own calculator, and modeling something out like that, because I described what it looks like in 1 year. So if you can wrap your head around that, that's a good first step, but it's still a big leap of confidence or step yeah, to say, oh, this will work forever. But now you can use this calculator, model it out, and give yourself the confidence and to think that, well, maybe you thought, oh, I would have had to have earned 300 grand per year, but really the numbers show it's only 120 grand a year. I could totally do that. Right. And then you need to just figure out how you would, make that happen. But I mentioned this calculator. I have That's what I'd like to tell your audience about. It's timefreedomcalculator.com, and it's 100% free to use. It's the same calculator that I use with the people that pay me a service to do a time freedom forecast for them. So it's out there. It's really powerful, and it's not difficult to use, and it can give you the confidence, um, once you put your numbers in there, to say, okay, I could probably do this. Then the next step is, how do you, what kind of business should it be? Usually, I recommend not innovative. Like, it should be something that you did in your corporate career and somehow turned it into your own business, because now you'll make double and you'll be, much more flexible. And then there's that comes after. But the first step is really, I just want people to feel comfortable that the numbers will work out, because I feel like that gives you a good first step, before you figure out exactly what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, that makes total sense, Brian. And it's great that you've got a resource out there that our listening audience can find again at timefreedomcalculator.com. We'll put that link in the show notes for the episode as well. There's one other kind of question that I have for you as we kind of wrap up here. I know that you emphasize building character over resumes. What does that actually look like in practice, and how would the person know if they're on the right track?
This this is something that I observed in myself now that I have time freedom. And so, and this it's translated into the conclusion of the book that I'm writing, which is, you know, I've learned that the old conclusion just summarizes the book. Well, a good conclusion says, now that you've achieved this, what's next for you? Right. And so, what I have observed is that we think we want all this time freedom, which is so helpful. And me too. I wanted it and I got it, but it's still very inward focused. It's how is my life going to be better? How is my life going to be better? And if of course, if you ask people as they get older and they're on their deathbed, they say it's all about the connections and the people that I'm associated with. So having achieved time freedom early, all of us who have this ability now to turn our focus outward and, you know, take that meal to the older gentleman across the street that lost his wife, because you have time to make it right, and do these small things that connect you, and you don't have to, wish, you don't have to recognize it at 85 years old and wish you had done it longer. You can do it now. And so that's what I mean around character building. And suddenly we're not focused on achievement and all the inward looking things. Our lens kind of on life really does look outward once we have the time to do it. And I'm not saying that people should just start doing it, because life is tough. I mean, people are trying to make ends meet. People are running kids all everywhere. Like, this is not, I'm not talking down to anybody, but when you kind of, like, I do think time freedom is like a first step to achieving this next thing. And it's something that I didn't know going in, but it's been really great, now that I do know it. So I'm excited for people to be able to experience that too.
Yeah, totally, and it makes total sense to me. I kind of resonate with what you're saying there myself, and I think it's an age thing more than anything. People get to a certain point in their lives and they realize I'm not going to live forever. Yes, I'd like to know what's going to be written, on my epitaph, and it really becomes more of a legacy thing, right? And finding ways that we can serve others, we can give back, whether that be with our time, our talents, money, right? And they really seek after this, purpose filled life, which ultimately for people really leads to joy, more than anything. And so I really appreciate, your perspectives on that, and totally agree with you as well. I just think a lot of folks maybe get, to their 70s and 80s and wish that they had taken that more seriously. But, for those listeners out there today that are, in their middle stage of their lives, definitely understand that that stage of your life is coming where it's not going to be so focused on serving you yourself, but it's going to be focused on, more external and serving others and giving back in that way. So with that said, Brian, what would be maybe one or two different ways that our listening audience can learn to connect with you to learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, I'll actually keep it simple, and I'll just refer you right back to that time freedom calculator. Um, from there, you can find other ways to get a hold of me. You can get on the wait list for my book. You can set up some time to talk to me. All those things, but it's a really nice jumping off point, and I find it very valuable. So hopefully you will too.
Yeah. Well, speaking of value, thank you for providing value to our listening audience today.
Thanks so much.